Al Capone, the infamous mob boss, bootlegger, and all-around bad boy of the Prohibition era. He's a man whose name is synonymous with organized crime, and whose exploits have been immortalized in countless books, movies, and TV shows. But who was he really, and what made him such a larger-than-life figure in American history? In this episode we'll take a closer look at the life and times of Al Capone, and explore some of the myths and legends that surround his legacy. Born in Brooklyn in 1899, Al Capone was the fourth of 9 children in a working-class Italian-American family. His parents were both immigrants from Naples, and they instilled in him a strong sense of loyalty to family and community, values that would later serve him well as a criminal mastermind. Growing up, Capone was a tough kid with a quick temper, and he got into his fair share of scrapes on the streets of New York. But he was also smart, and he had a talent for math that would come in handy later on. In 1919, the 20-year-old Capone moved to Chicago, where he got his start in the world of organized crime. At the time, Prohibition was in full swing, and the illegal sale of alcohol was a lucrative business for those willing to take the risk. Capone quickly made a name for himself as an enforcer for Johnny Torrio, a fellow Brooklynite who had established a major bootlegging operation in Chicago. Capone's job was to intimidate rival gangsters and protect Torrio's interests, and he was damn good at it. Over the next few years, Capone rose through the ranks of the Chicago underworld, becoming one of the city's most powerful and feared gangsters. He was known for his flashy style, his love of cigars and fine whiskey, and his willingness to use violence to get what he wanted. But he was also a savvy businessman, and he had a knack for building and maintaining alliances with other criminal organizations. By the mid-1920s, Capone was making millions of dollars a year from his various criminal enterprises. He controlled a vast network of speakeasies, breweries, and distilleries, and he had a team of loyal henchmen who would do his bidding without question. He was also a major philanthropist, donating large sums of money to charitable causes in Chicago and other cities. But with great power comes great scrutiny, and Capone's high-profile lifestyle soon attracted the attention of the authorities. In 1927, he was arrested and charged with income tax evasion, a relatively minor offense, but one that could land him in prison for years. Capone initially laughed off the charges, confident that he could buy his way out of trouble. But when his lawyers failed to get the case dismissed, he began to worry. The trial that followed was a media circus, with reporters from all over the country descending on Chicago to cover the proceedings. Capone was portrayed as a ruthless criminal who had amassed a fortune by exploiting the weaknesses of others. But he was also seen as a folk hero by many working-class Americans, who admired his swagger and his defiance of authority. In the end, Capone was found guilty of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He spent much of his time behind bars in Alcatraz, where he continued to run his criminal empire from a distance. But he was never able to regain the power and influence he had enjoyed in his heyday, and by the time he was released in 1939, he was a broken man. Capone's legacy is a complicated one. On the one hand, he was a ruthless criminal who caused a great deal of harm and suffering to those who crossed him. He was responsible for countless acts of violence, from beatings and shootings to bombings and arson. He was also known for his involvement in prostitution, gambling, and other illegal activities, which had a corrosive effect on the social fabric of the communities he operated in. On the other hand, Capone was also a product of his times. Prohibition created an environment in which organized crime thrived, and Capone was simply one of many gangsters who took advantage of the situation. He was also a complex character, with a charismatic personality that made him popular among some segments of the population. He was known to be generous with his money, and he was said to have a soft spot for children. But in many ways, Capone was a product of his environment. Becoming so powerful and influential that he began to believe he was untouchable, and he made enemies who were eager to see him brought down. Today, Capone's legacy lives on in popular culture, where he is often portrayed as a larger-than-life figure who embodied the lawlessness and excess of the Prohibition era. Some portray him as a ruthless monster, while others depict him as a Robin Hood-like figure who stood up to corrupt authorities. In the end, the truth about Capone is probably somewhere in between these extremes. He was a criminal who caused a great deal of harm to those around him, but he was also a product of his times, operating in an environment that encouraged lawlessness and corruption. As for Capone himself, he died in 1947 at the age of 48. He had spent the last years of his life in declining health, suffering from the effects of syphilis and other illnesses. He was a man who rose to the top of the criminal underworld, only to be brought down by the very authorities he had long defied. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.